Welcome back, everybody. It's time for another thrilling edition of Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey Sports Original podcast, also heard on the radio in Las Vegas on 101.5 ADON and on 98.5 the Bet HD2. So hello, and thanks for listening to our Las Vegas audience. And we are here to talk about Raiders football. Do us a favor, if you don't already subscribe to the podcast, do so wherever you get your audio. Just look for Silver and Black Today. Hit subscribe, and then do us a favor, rate and review as well. We always appreciate the comments and the love for the show, whether you're listening on the radio or on the podcast. And of course, if you're listening on the radio in Las Vegas, the podcast, we do several episodes a week. So you hear us once on Sundays on the radio, but you can hear us all week long. So make sure you subscribe there as well. Also, a shout out to our good friends at BetUS who bring you our video feed, BetUS, where you can get 150% sign-up bonus. That's right, 150% sign-up bonus for joining, just using the code YouTube150. That's YouTube150. Start playing today. Get your free money, 150%, up to $2,000 on that first deposit. So thanks to our friends at BetUS. Scott Branson back with you, as well as my partner in crime here, and that is, of course, Mr. Mo Moten Mose, the senior NFL writer at Bleacher Report, also the Raiders columnist at sportsnot.com. You can follow him on X at Mo Moten, Moemoton. You can follow me, LV Gully, as well up there. And the show is SNB Today. All right, Mo. Well, we're going to get back to some Raiders football this week, man. I mean, they're going to Miami, and we're going to get into the kind of Miami matchup in segment 2. This segment we're going to talk about, you talked about on the last show, doing some of the research on Scott Turner and, of course, Norv Turner, his father, and the history there and what we might see. So we'll start with that. But it's going to be good to get them back on the field with all of the negatives and the challenges we've seen so far, Mo. Just getting back to football. Now, hopefully it's better and more, I think, efficient football when they come back. But it's just good to get them back on the field after this bye week.
Good to get them back on the field if you're a diehard Raider fan and you don't care about them winning and losing because it doesn't affect your mood. But there are some people that just want to fast forward to the offseason. I understand that. So that was part of the reason why I wrote the piece about my expectations for the offense, because I think there are some quote-unquote exciting things to look forward to in the second half of the season, specifically on the offensive side of the football, with Scott Turner and Norv Turner, the Turners, taking over the offense. So I'm actually going to be glued to the TV because I want to see how it looks in the early beginnings of the game. I know Rome wasn't built in a day. I think Devontae Adams wrote that on his IG, and then went on with the Jets to get smashed by the Cardinals. But that's a whole different story. But as I said, Rome wasn't built in a day, so it's not going to all look like a well-oiled machine right away. But you can kind of see, I guess, the way the offense is going to be run going forward once they get back on the field against the Dolphins. And I expect to see a bag of tricks, not a bag of tricks, but just a more exciting offense than we saw in the first half of the season.
I mean, and they're in the point now where you're Scott Turner and now Norv Turner, the father-son duo. You have nothing to lose, right? I mean, you have opportunity, and so the opportunity is in front of you. If you can show market improvement with this offense by doing things different, because clearly what they were doing was not working. So you're not going to go back to that. Now, you can't scrap everything and completely revamp an offense, because you just don't have the time to do that. And of course, they didn't practice last week, so you didn't get a head start on it. So you kind of have to introduce different concepts and different things more slowly. So I'm not expecting them to go from the 29th ranked offense in the NFL to being in the top 10, top 15. I don't expect that. But to your point, seeing some more creativity, seeing some utilization of the talent they do have on offense, Tucker and Bowers targeting him more consistently, those types of things. I certainly think you could see improvement on that right away. And that's what I want to dive into with you, my friend, is talking about this offense, talking about the history of Norv Turner and, of course, Scott Turner. Now, a lot of Raider fans, especially if you're a little bit older, you know Norv Turner from his time, not only with the Dallas Cowboys, where he really made the biggest name for himself as an offensive coordinator, and then on to become a head coach in several spots, including the Raiders in Oakland, and of course with the Chargers in San Diego and so on. But if you look at Scott Turner, on the other hand, he if you look at his early career, Mo, this is where I'm skeptical about Scott Turner. Just to say, I'm not saying he can't do better than Luke Getsy, because I think pretty much anybody can. But you look at his history. Scott Turner starts off with the Panthers with Ron Rivera, obviously because of the relationship with Norv Turner. He's with the Browns, with the Vikings, all working for his father, working for Norv Turner there. Nepotism in the NFL is nothing new. It happens all the time. And then he went for a little sojourn with the Michigan Wolverines after getting fired in 2017 from the Vikings. Goes back to Carolina, is a interim offensive coordinator after Ron Rivera was fired, then goes to Washington and lasted a few seasons there before he was fired as well, and then becomes the passing game coordinator for the Raiders last year. So you look at what Scott Turner's done, and it's easy to look at his resume, Mo, and say, well, he's been fired everywhere he's gone. Now, all coaches get fired at one point or another, but he's really not, I think, put forward any work that makes you think, okay, this could be a long-term answer, number one. And number two, I wonder, when you look at this, what are we missing? What does he bring to the table versus, it's easy to find the negatives, but from a positive perspective, what do you see that he does? And with his father there, what he could do with this Raiders team that gives you a little bit of hope?
Well, the first thing is more experience than Luke Getsy had or has. Luke Getsy was only an offensive coordinator on the pro level for 2 years. Scott Turner, 3 years and a quarter. And I know you're saying that's not much more than Luke Getsy, but he also has a bloodline with his father calling plays as well. So he has that working for him. But the other thing is, and I think you mentioned it briefly, this is not I don't believe it's a long-term fix. Mm-hmm. This is just a fix. This is this patchwork to get you through the season and potentially for Antonio Pierce to save his job. So you're just looking for enough of a spark where the Raiders can show improvement to say, hey, we're not a team that struggles to score 20 points. We could score 20 points even without Devontae Adams and behind Jacoby Myers, a bunch of wide receiver 3s and 4s. So this is just about getting to the end of the season. This is not a Turner reunion for a complete fix of the Raiders offense.
Right.
So if you're looking at it from that perspective, I think it's a positive if they're able to push the ball down the field, which I think they will be able to do.
Well, and like I said, I mean, you have what they were doing was a complete failure. So there's nowhere to go but up. So I don't expect them to get worse. I'll put it that way, right? I don't expect them to go backwards per se. Even if Desmond Ridder is the quarterback, and obviously he's got his issues with turnovers and whatnot, but I do think if you look at the history, and we talk about things like scheme here, and that is going back to Norv Turner and Scott Turner, like you said, the lineage, he's adopted a lot of the same philosophy, which, as you mentioned last show, which is the Don Coryell, the Air Coryell philosophy that came, that West Coast, not West Coast offense, but the vertical offense that came out in the 70s with the San Diego Chargers and Don Coryell, and then was co-opted by Bill Walsh in San Francisco and evolved into many of the things you see today. But that scheme, Mo, with Scott Turner, and I expect this if the quarterback can execute, right? Because you have to be able to throw the ball. And I think Desmond Ridder is a very athletic guy. So I think they're probably going to feel empowered to do what they want to do with him at quarterback. But the idea here is to spread the field vertically, horizontally, basically all over the place. And not only that, but remember that offense, people forget, because it's such a pass offense and it's got the vertical challenges and it's got a lot of passing. They forget how it also can create really a very robust running game. I mean, remember Emmitt Smith in Dallas, those years when Norv Turner was there, right? I mean, they were passing the ball over the place too, but he ran the hell out of the ball and it was pretty damn good for the Dallas Cowboys. Talk a little bit about that scheme, about that Air Coryell system, and how the Raiders, the current talent they have, how that could fit in well, and maybe we see some marked better results heading into Miami and beyond.
So 3 things I expect. 2 are relatively new wrinkles for the Raiders this year. 1, as you mentioned, I expect them to go vertical a lot more, with Desmond Ridder throwing to his former collegiate teammate, Trey Tucker, who I believe has 1 catch out of 8 targets on passes 20 plus yards downfield. So not only were the Raiders not utilizing him enough downfield, Gardner Minshew wasn't accurate. So you're hoping that Desmond Ritter is a lot more accurate so they can be a lot more efficient in the vertical game. What I also expect is for them to go back to a power blocking scheme. So scrap the whole zone blocking, or you're going to see fewer zone blocking concepts with Zamir White possibly reemerging as not the starter, not the lead back, but I expect it to be more 50-50. Scott Turner, when he was in Washington, he had Antonio Gibson, who's more of a hybrid wide receiver running back. Remember, he was a wide receiver at Memphis. And Alexander Madison is the pass catching back on this football team, the primary pass catching back on third down. So while Zamir White should be more involved, I don't expect a full takeover. What we saw last year, just more of a mix between he and Madison with it more of a 50-50, 60-40 split. The other thing is, and this isn't new, I don't expect this change to adversely affect Brock Bowers. So if you remember the air choreo system with the Chargers, Kellen Winslow Sr. was basically a wide receiver in that system. And labeled a tight end, but basically a playmaker. And that's the same way that Brock Bowers can operate in this offense. So for the people wondering, what does this do for Brock Bowers? I think he'll still be effective regardless, just simply because he'll play that Kellen Winslow role in this offense. So you get the two new wrinkles, more downfield passes, back to more power blocking, but you'll also still continue to see Brock Bowers be a star in this league.
Mo, we talk about the quarterback. So if you look at Desmond Ritter, clearly I think it benefits the Raiders to go there. Gardner Minshew has lost confidence. We know what's been happening there. And yeah, he's under contract for another year, but so what? Why not put Ritter in there, see what you got? You and I have talked about that several times on the show over the past couple of weeks since they claimed him off the practice squad in Arizona. And I think you look at the one thing that I want to give Scott Turner credit for, if you look back at his coaching record, was when he was in Carolina. Okay. When he was in Carolina, he helped Cam Newton improve. He was the quarterback's coach there, worked directly with him. You saw his completion percentage. You saw his turnovers go down. And so maybe, just maybe too, him and Aiden O'Connell the rest of the way too, when Aiden O'Connell comes back, Scott Turner may have an opportunity to get better performance out of those quarterbacks because he has a record of being able to do that, including with Cam Newton.
You're right about that. And also you have to think about what he did. I kind of put a lot more weight on what he did in Washington. Now, I know Taylor Heineke didn't exactly, stand out in Washington, but that's where Taylor Heineke started to get some quality starts in. Because if you remember, Taylor Heineke had bounced out of the league. He was on the Minnesota Vikings practice squad for a while, played a lot on their preseason squad. He got a chance in Washington, actually played well in the playoff game as well. So if you look at 2022, Taylor Heineke's intended air yards per attempt went up as the season went on. And Taylor Heineke is a high-end backup, low-end starter. It's probably what you could say about Desmond Ritter, very similar in their status as quarterbacks. So I would expect Desmond Ritter, if he gets comfortable in the offense, I know he only has half a season, but he's a more experienced starter than Taylor Heineke was when Scott Turner was with him, because Desmond Ritter played in Atlanta as a starter. So he has more playing experience, so he should be able to pick up the offense a lot faster than Taylor Heineke was. And also remember, the air choreo system isn't as complicated as the West Coast offense, where the play calls aren't as long. Not to get too nerdy with it, but the receiver routes, the pass catcher routes are labeled by numbers. So you have to be able to call out those numbers in order because you want to get the exact play in. But without getting too deep in the weeds with it, Scott, it's a lot easier to pick up than the West Coast offense with the verbiage.
Yeah, that's why I think you'll see. I really believe you'll see instant improvement. I'm not saying they're going to light the world on fire and score 45 points a game either. But I do think that even when they fail, they'll fail by challenging and really pushing, which is, I think, what you want to see, right? Look, we know the Raiders aren't going to the playoffs. We know that this year is kind of a wash, but you can still see improvement. You can start to see, too, with a qualified offensive coordinator next year, either under Antonio Pierce or a different head coach, you can start to see how the talent fits in and what systems may work best for the talent that you have so far. And then, of course, you go out and add to it. So it'll be really interesting. And I think that this working together of Scott and Norv Turner, because like I said, Scott Turner in all but I think 2 stops has worked with his father each time. So we'll see how they're able to do that and put it together, especially now in a triage position where they're just trying to get through the rest of the season, as you said. Not a permanent fix, but can they fix enough so that the Raiders can at least become more competitive and get that offense at least headed in the right direction? Okay, we're going to take our first break here. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the game coming up against the Miami Dolphins on Sunday morning on the West Coast, of course, Sunday afternoon. Eastern time, how does that look? The Dolphins are coming on a little bit more since they got Tua back, and we'll see what happens with that one. But we will break it down for you, and we will also talk to you later as well and try to get some of your calls in the Raider Nation mailbag. All right, it's Scott, it's Mo. You're watching us thanks to the folks at BetUS, who you're going to hear from here in just a second. This is Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey Sports original podcast. Don't go anywhere. Hey, everybody, it is Scott Branson with Silver and Black Today. I want to tell you about our good friends at BetUS. We've told you about this special promotion, 150% sign-up bonus if you use our special code that, of course, is YouTube150. But let me tell you why we love BetUS and why Mo and I are betting our football there. First of all, check out the website, mobile app, all great stuff. Not only do they give you great odds, but they give you quick payouts and so many options. You can create your own prop bets, parlay them together with the parlay builder, the prop builder. Just amazing stuff here. We appreciate everything that these guys do. Not only can you bet NFL football like we are, as you can see here, I'm betting the Raiders. Yeah, I'm taking the Raiders, even though this line continues to go down a little bit against the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins win, but I like the Raiders with a backdoor cover here. And not only that, but you could bet on everything at BetUS. I mean, you could have bet on the presidential election that just happened. You can bet on everything from football to soccer to hockey to baseball futures and all those prop bets we're talking about. Really fun stuff. NBA is ramping up, obviously, at the beginning of the season. A lot of crazy things happening there. So if you're into the NBA action, you can find it as well. Listen, BetUS, the best place, where we bet our sports. So make sure you go check it out. And again, make sure you get that special 150% bonus. That's right, 150% bonus up to $2,000 just using the code YouTube150. Not only that, they're going to give you your second and third deposit up to $2,000. They're going to give you 125%. So bam, it's a double whammy. Make sure you check out the folks at BetUS. And don't forget, YouTube150 is the code, YouTube150 for that special offer. And we will see you next time talking about our good friends BetUS, who bring you the video from Silver and Black Today. Good people, great stuff, great place to bet your sports. Hey, welcome back. It is time for segment number 2, Silver and Black Today. Mo Moten, Scott Branson, back with you, talking Raiders football. Yes, they get to play again this week. No more bye weeks. It's over. Back to focusing on football. Oh, speaking of, don't forget to focus on subscribing to the show. Wherever you get your audio, just look for Silver and Black Today. Subscribe, rate, and review if you would, please. We thank you for that. Also, our video, if you're watching us on video, it's brought to you by the great folks at BetUS, where, don't forget, you can get 150% sign-up bonus just because we're here and we love you as our listeners and viewers. We're going to give you a 150% bonus. We twisted the arms of the people at BetUS. Actually, we didn't. They're just awesome people. 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit up to $2,000. They'll even give you 125% on your second and third deposit, also up to $2,000. Just use the code YouTube150. Start playing today. Get out there, have some fun, and win some money. Right, Mo? You're gonna help them win money too. You got your picks every week as well. And what's that? You got another sponsorship thing that you're doing. What is the name of that? I know people are tracking your picks there.
The Dub Club.
Dub Club. Thank you.
Subscription that I have going on there. That's where I usually have all my NFL picks. They usually like 20 to 30 on Sunday. I also do a little NBA. So and I also drop my BetUS picks in those Dub Club messages. So be on the lookout for those. As I said on the last show, I'm on a 5-game cash streak over at BetUS with my picks. So look out for those this week.
Lunch on Mo today. He's bringing it in. He's got extra cash now. So if you need to hit him up for lunch, if you give him a call, we'll go from there. All right, good deal. It's good stuff. All right, so we are talking Raiders versus the Dolphins, and this one will be interesting because again, you're going to have not only the new offensive situation going on, you have the kind of clearing of the air meeting that we talked about last show on Tuesday with the CBS report from the weekend, where the players weren't happy with the coaching staff and some of the inefficiencies, deficiencies, whatever that means. We didn't get exactly all the details. But clearly, going into the bye week, they got whatever was on their chest off their chest. So my assumption is they roll back into Henderson at the Raiders training facility this week, and it should be a clean slate for them, right? Got a lot to learn on the offensive side. Defense needs to continue to build, get better. They still have to deal with injuries on the defensive side, but they also need to get better. You look at coming into this game and getting ready for Miami, who struggled obviously with Tua out and what they've been dealing with there, even people clamoring already for firing the coach down there. You look at the Dolphins team playing better. Raiders have traditionally had problems going to the East Coast and winning. What's the key to this game, especially with where the Raiders are at and the matchup, Mo, the matchup with this Dolphins team who looks to be playing better on offense and their defense seems to be coming along more as well?
They have to be able to stop the run. I think that's going to be the focus. Now, the Rays have done a lot better recently at playing up the middle. But with the Dolphins, their offense is going to change a bit because Tyreek Hill is dealing with torn ligaments in his wrist. That's why he's not the same Tyreek Hill you're used to seeing, not the same explosive Tyreek Hill used to seeing. He did score a touchdown against the Rams, but it was a short pass. And he admit that he doesn't know how to react because he's never been hurt playing through an injury like this before. He had an issue with police and basically said that messed him up. Those were his words. So I think the Dolphins are going to focus on trying to exploit the middle of the Raiders' run defense. That means Devon Achane is going to be active, Raheem Mostert, and their rookie, who a lot of people are overlooking, in Jalen Wright. So they have a three-headed monster in that backfield. And if the Raiders aren't able to stop that three-headed monster, it's going to roll downhill from the first quarter. Now, that doesn't mean that you leave Tyreek Hill on one-on-one and you think he's not going to be able to hurt you, because he can still do that. Jalen Waddle on the other side. The other playmaker that I would look out for is Jonnu Smith. Now, Jonnu Smith only had 3 catches against the Rams, but he's been a staple in that offense. Before that Rams game, I believe he had about 4 catches a game for a stretch. So the Raiders have had their issues covering the tight end. They've had their issues stopping the run. So those are the 2 things they have to do defensively. Offensively, I think they have to also run the football effectively. I know we've been saying that for 2 months now. But the Dolphins' pass defense is a lot stronger than their run defense. If you're going to attack the Dolphins, you got to get it done on the ground. And hopefully with Scott Turner and the Turners coming in, they can get Zamir White going and have a 2-man backfield of their own with Madison and Zamir White going downhill against that Dolphins defense.
The two-headed Turner, yes. And you talk about that, the fact that the Dolphins much better against the pass, and we know that the pedigree that they have, and of course the roster is good. The Raiders, and that's why I think, as I said earlier in the show, I do think you'll see better performance out of the Raiders offense, but I think it's going to be a struggle. You might see more of that vertical game because of the Turner influence, but it's going to be harder to execute because of the defensive matchup there. And with the run game too, Mo, how much, for people who are not as heavy into X's and O's, how much can you change from that zone blocking scheme and maybe simplify it with this new scheme with the Turners? How is that going to impact that offense? Because if the running game is going to get going, which they need to do to win this game, they have to get that offensive line to perform better. And I think that offensive line lost some confidence and obviously wasn't grasping, for whatever reason, that scheme that Getsy put forward. What do they need to do, and what can the Turners do to maybe ignite that offensive line so that they play better, they feel more confident, and can produce more opportunities for that running game?
Well, assuming that they run a lot more power blocking, the Turners are just going to have to be patient, because why everyone's going to focus on Zamir White. Zamir White is used to being in that system from last year. We saw when he took over for Josh Jacobs. But when you're dealing with an offensive line, also has to transition an offensive line with potentially 2 rookie starters. Yeah. Let's remember that DJ Glaze and Jackson Powers-Johnson weren't there last year. So with that transition in the middle of the season, you're going to have to be a little bit more patient with 2 rookies. and a new offensive line than what you had in previous year. So it could take some time. And don't forget also Colton Miller was in a walking boot after that Bengals loss. We don't know what his status is as we're recording this Wednesday morning. But they're gonna have to have a quick gelling period. The chemistry is gonna have to get together really quick, assuming that they do make some changes in the middle of the season like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the key here too, is progress, right? So I'm not expecting even everything we talked about in the first segment, Mo, about the Turners and what they can do to kind of improve the situation. And again, I do believe it will be improved, but I'm not thinking, you're not going to go from 0 to 10 in 1 week, really a half a week, because they're just jumping in. They can't change too much because they didn't practice last week. Now, over the next few weeks, I would see them introduce more and more and more as we move forward. But I also think that they need to keep it simple. You need to build the trust. You need to also build the familiarity. If they change some of the language with the play calling that Luke Getsy used, to your point about the Coryell system versus that West Coast system with the longer callouts, it'll be interesting. And I do think as well, we also heard very good news. Michael Mayer is back in the building practicing with the team this week, which is big for them. And I bring Michael Mayer up not just to remind people that he's back, and it's good. I'm glad he's worked on whatever he was dealing with. But you look at Desmond Ridder. I just assume Desmond Ridder is going to start. I mean, they've said it, but now it's Scott Turner's decision, really. With Desmond Ridder, he's not a rookie. He's as you said, he started some big games in Atlanta, had some huge statistical games, including some big wins in Atlanta. So this is not a guy that's unfamiliar with going in and going on the road, a difficult situation. But what do you need to do if you're the Turners there too, and you bring Desmond Ridder in? You know what his strengths are. He's a very athletic guy. You now have both of your tight ends. You have the Bowers, obviously there, and you have Michael Mayer. What do you do with Desmond Ridder? What kind of game plan do you scheme up against this Dolphins defense? Because you're right, it's going to be harder to go vertical. So do you start to think about these shorter routes, utilizing that 12 personnel, and thinking about how you get the ball out quickly and into the hands of these receivers in shorter routes? How do you think they're going to scheme that against this Dolphins defense?
The first thing is you want Desmond Ridder to get a rhythm in the offense. You want to get used to his new teammates, so to speak. He's outside of Trey Tucker. He's not really familiar with anyone on that offense. Now, he did play briefly against the Cincinnati Bengals, but he was thrown into the fire in the third quarter, I believe. So, got to give him an established rhythm. So, short to intermediate passes. Brock Bowers will definitely help in that regard. Short passes to the running backs out of the backfield. That's Alexander Madison and Amir Abdullah. And then you find out how well is your offensive line blocking. If your offensive line is struggling against the Miami Dolphins defensive front, you might have to go short to intermediate throughout the whole game. If the offensive line is playing pretty well, then you could take some more deep shots downfield. Then you may see more Trey Tucker. You may see more of Ramil Keaton, who I wrote about in my Sportsnaut piece. Downfield, a 6'2", 95-pound wide receiver who averaged over 18 yards per catch at Tennessee. The Raiders have the playmakers to go downfield. They're unheralded right now. But if Desmond Ridder can get enough time, he could definitely take some shots. If you watched him in Atlanta, he did take shots downfield in Atlanta. The problem is he threw some interceptions. So you want to stay away from the turnovers and looking more like Gardner Minshew than an efficient quarterback in the pocket.
Well, and remember the relationship with Trey Tucker. So that's the one guy, Desmond Ridder, even though he hasn't played pros with him very much, he knows Trey Tucker from their time together in Cincinnati, at the University of Cincinnati. So I think that you just know guys, you get familiar, but Trey Tucker has to be on the field, number one, and he has to be open for that to work out. But I certainly hope that we see more Trey Tucker. We saw at the beginning of the season, Luke Getsy was utilizing him a little more, and it seemed to work out pretty good for them. I'd like to see that more as well. We switch sides of the ball now, Mo, for the rest of this segment on the Raiders defense. And you start to look at that Dolphins offense, which last year was just nuts. It was crazy explosive. You talked about Tyreek Hill's injury and how that's kind of taken away some of that explosiveness, but they can beat you in all kinds of ways. They can run the ball. They can pass the ball. When you look at it, seems like with Tua back now, and again, I just couldn't believe Tua made a tackle with his head in that last game on Monday night. I was like, what are you doing? Like, if I'm the coaching staff, I'm telling them, Tua, any play, I don't care if it's, just stand there. Don't move. Don't get anywhere near tackling people. Just don't do it. But Tua looked good at moments. He's kind of an enigma, right? Tua, some games he looks like he's going to be a Hall of Famer. In other games, he doesn't look like he's going to make it. When you look at this offense since he's come back, and it seems a little bit more resurgence, even though it's not as explosive, Raiders defense up front, particularly putting pressure on Tua and getting in there to force him out of his comfort zone. Do you have a lot of faith that this Raiders defense, where we've kind of seen this Raiders defense fall back a little bit, is this an opportunity for them to maybe get back on the right track for that second half of the season?
The Raiders defense is actually pretty good on the perimeter, secondary particularly. So I don't expect Tyreek Hill with the torn ligaments in his wrist and Jalen Waddle to go off. I'm more worried about the middle of the field, the short to intermediate zones on the Raiders side of the defense. Are you going to let Jonnu Smith go off for 70 plus yards? Because if you are, that's going to be a problem. Not only Jonnu Smith, but Devon Achane is the number one playmaker that I'm worried about on the Dolphins side, because not only can he run the ball downhill and get you a 20-yard gain on any given handoff, but he can also catch and run and get you an 80-yard reception for a touchdown. So, the Raiders defense, the linebackers have to be in sync. They cannot be out of their rush lanes. They have to be aware of Devon Achane catching out of the backfield. Raheem Mostert, I know he's up there in age for a running back, but he caught a couple of passes against the Rams out of the backfield. All their running backs are able to catch out of the backfield. I know they haven't utilized Jalen Wright in that sense yet, but their running backs are basically interchangeable, where they can go downhill and get you 20 yards, or they can catch and get you 20 yards. So the Raiders have to minimize the explosive plays that the Dolphins are able to get on Sunday.
Yeah, and I think the Raiders need to do everything they can to keep Miami out of third and shorts, right? They need to really, I think, make Miami struggle with that, because, like you said, the Dolphins aren't as explosive. The Raiders are good on the perimeter. We're seeing great play by defensive backs for the Raiders, Hobbs, all these guys, Ja'Cory Bennett. So I think that if they can keep Miami off balance there, not give them the ability to open up that playbook, 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, it's a little bit different than if you're 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. So I think the Raiders really on 1st and 2nd down need to come out and show that, so that you can limit the Dolphins, make them pass against you. I mean, I just would, knowing that the Raiders have an opportunity to do better on that. So we'll see what they're able to do. What do you think on this game? I still give the Dolphins the edge, obviously, because of being a home game, being on the East Coast. I think they're just in a little better place than the Raiders are. We have so many unknowns with the Raiders. I think the Raiders will actually keep this somewhat close, but I still see the Dolphins winning this game. I just don't see the Raiders going on the road and doing it. What do you think?
Now, Pierce said they probably won't practice during the bye because of their injuries.
Yeah.
They have a new offensive play caller who could be scrapping a lot of what Luke Getsy has done. So with that, knowing that, I expect the Raiders to start out slow. I expect it to be the opposite of what we saw in the first half of the season, where the Raiders usually score in their first 2 drives. I don't think we see that. I think they're going to have to work through some things early, and they try to pick it up late. If you're a betting man or woman, could be a possibility of a backdoor cover. Dolphins are favored by 7.5 points. Last time I looked, from my Bet US and Dub Club people, worried about a backdoor cover if you're picking the Dolphins, but I think the Raiders start to pick it up in the second half, and you start to see more of what this offense could look like under the Turners.
Yeah, I actually bet the Raiders. I got it at 8. The Dolphins were 8-point favorites, so I like the Dolphins. Yeah, I like the Dolphins to win by a touchdown. It might be 2 field goals, whatever, but I that 8 number was too sexy for me not to jump in on, even though I've had no faith in the Raiders being able to score points. It just feels good, so we'll see. But anyway, it's a good opportunity. And again, you have to shift your perspective and say, hey, do you see progress? Again, we've been talking about that for weeks, right, Mo? Which is like, hey, if you just see progress, we talked about it with Antonio Pierce and his situation as head coach. Look, not expecting you to turn around and make the playoffs and make some magical run. What we'd like to see is improvement. And I like to see the improvement on the offense, see them do things different, see the defense build on its strengths, and then do some other things where they improve too, like you said, against the run. So we'll see how it all nets out. All right, we're going to take our final break. When we come back, we'll get to the Raider Nation mailbag, which is a little thin now. We got some calls to make up from last time, as well as a couple messages and a YouTube comment I want to read, because there's some really good YouTube comments coming in during this whole situation. So we'll get to that when we come back. It's Scott, it's Mo. This is Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey Sports original podcast heard on the radio, 101.5 KDON in Las Vegas, as well as 98.5 The Bet, and our video brought to you by the great folks at BetUS. All right, welcome back. Segment number 3, the home stretch here on Silver and Black Today. Guess what time it is? Yes, it is time for the Raider Nation mailbag.
Enough of hearing us talk about the Raiders. It's time to hear from you.
Any Oakland Raider fan, Las Vegas Raider fan, stand up.
On this edition of the Raider Nation mailbag.
That black hole rocking and rolling.
Don't be a wallflower. Be a part of the show. Leave your question or message by calling 702-900-7869. That's 702-900-7869. Or drop us an email at mail@silverandblacktoday.com.
All right. Again, welcome back. Don't forget that 150% bonus offer, your first deposit at BetUS, up to $2,000. Just use the YouTube 150 code. That's right. The promo code YouTube 150, and you're going to get that from our good friends at BetUS, who sponsor the video. Again, we're back. We're Silver and Black Today. Yes, we are. We are Odyssey Sports Original Contact podcast. And you can hear us on the radio, 101.5 KDON in Las Vegas, as well as 98.5 The Bet. All right, we're going to jump right in here, man. You ready, Mo?
I think so.
We're going out to this great Salt Lake City. Here's Armando, first call of the day.
Scott and Mo, this is Armando from Salt Lake City. It's been a minute since I've talked to you guys. A lot has happened between then and now. I think with all the, I'm listening to you guys and that in between, and I think I'm with you guys that I'm out on Antonio Pierce. Now, I'm willing to be convinced, depending on how these last 8 games go, but I just don't see it. And one of the things that I know Mo asks about a lot is, do you trust him to be able to build the staff? And I'm calling shortly after an article came out on SportsNaut that was really good about how Antonio Pierce, the staff that he's assembled is pretty disjointed, doesn't have a lot of cohesion. And I think that's a really big problem going forward. And it mentioned like how questioning the direction of the team. My question to you guys is, I know a lot of people want to talk about, Sanders and Ward next year. For me, the biggest thing is going to be nailing the head coaching hire next year and going forward. To the point of cohesion, I think that's where this is something that I've thought about, and I know you guys have brought up in the past. That's why it's nice to have somebody with an offensive vision as your head coach. They could be the play caller, but it allows for that cohesion to be able to fill out all the other staff roles under that coach. So, I look at, and in order to do that, you look at coaching trees. So you look at, back in the day, Bill Walsh turned into Mike Holmgren, turned into yada, yada, yada. Right now, the big coaching tree is the Shanahan coaching tree, which goes back to, Bill Walsh. But you look at Sean McVay, you look at Kyle Shanahan, you look at, Mike McDaniel in Miami. So my question to you guys is, if no Antonio Pierce next year, I know everybody likes Ben Johnson and Bobby Slowick. Other than those 2 names, what are some names that you would like to see the Raiders at least interview next year? One for me that really jumps out is Frank Smith from Miami, past Raider coach, but I think he'd be a really nice fit. But I want to hear from you guys. What do you think would be, if we wanted to go that route, what would be some good names that the Raiders should interview? All right, guys, keep being you. Keep being awesome, and looking forward to keep on connecting with you guys. Take care.
Armando in Salt Lake. Good call, man. A lot of stuff there to unpack, but I want to start with the first thing, Mo. I want to ask you this too, because one of the things that I continue to have discussions with online are people who want to compare Antonio Pierce's struggles to Dan Campbell's. We talked about it last episode. We talked about the episode before. And Armando hit on it right there, which is about the ability to hire a staff. When I express my continued skepticism over whether or not Antonio Pierce can do the job long term, that's where I go. I'm not going on 2-7. So Dan Campbell 3-13, and if the Raiders win 3 games and go 3-14, for example, it's not comparable because you have to look at what they're doing to create a staff. And you mentioned it last time. He had Ben Johnson on his staff, young people on his staff. Not to mention, he also had a decade worth of NFL coaching experience, including being assistant head coach under Sean Payton. Much different situation. And the Lions roster, the year that he went 3-13, even with injuries, was much worse than the Raiders roster. They turned it around quickly there too. So not comparable. But when you look at that situation, I think that's where a lot of fans who look at it outside, not the emotion of whether you like the guy or not, they see that, Mo, because they understand that, no, there's not just one magic coach. A coach comes in, they bring with them a staff. And can they bring with them a staff that they can not only execute quickly and win and improve right away, but do they also have people in their pipeline? I think that's part of the issue here.
Right. So one of the most important things about being a head coach is, as I said on the last show on Tuesday, is not just the X's and O's. And we know Antonio Pierce is not really an X's and O's guy as far as play calling is concerned. It's about building a quality staff, which goes back to, again, why I like Dan Quinn as a head coaching candidate in the last cycle, because he proved that he can build a quality coaching staff. Kyle Shanahan, Mike McDaniel, Raheem Morris, they're all head coaches now. They were on Dan Quinn's staff when he was in Atlanta. Now, to Armando's question about who I want to see the Raiders interview, right now, my number one candidate is Liam Cohen, the offensive coordinator of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I know people are going to say Baker Mayfield was also very good under Dave Canales, who's now in Carolina. I think he's even better of a quarterback now under Liam Cohen. And you also have to add in the context that the Buccaneers have lost their 2 top wide receivers, and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and Baker Mayfield is still putting up numbers with a tight end and running backs. So for all the people that say, well, injuries, the Buccaneers are dealing with critical injuries right now. Again, their top 2 wide receivers, Pro Bowl guys, are not on the field, and Baker Mayfield is still moving the ball up and down the field, putting up points, nearly beat the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday. I get almost doesn't matter, but if Todd Bowles goes for 2 instead of kicking the extra point and going in overtime, the Buccaneers might have pulled off that win. So I'm bringing in Liam Cohen. He is from the Sean McVay coaching tree. So he's gone back and forth from Kentucky to the Los Angeles Rams over the past few years. He's had multiple stints with both teams and or programs. I like Liam Cohen as my number one. The other one I'd want to talk to is Todd Monken, who's the offensive coordinator of the Baltimore Ravens. I understand that Lamar Jackson was an MVP before he got there, but like Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay, I think Lamar Jackson is even a better quarterback now under Todd Monken when he's able to do with that offense. Not only does the Ravens team not have an elite wide receiver, I know Zay Flowers is there, but they have a bunch of playmakers, and they basically pick any given week where Mark Andrews can go up, Isaiah Likely can go up, Rashad Bateman is coming along as a former first-round pick. I mentioned Zay Flowers. They bring in Keaton Mitchell, who's a speedy running back out of the backfield to complement Derrick Henry. That offense is able to be flexible because they have so many playmakers, and that's kind of what I want to see out of the Raiders going forward with their offensive coordinator and their playmakers. So Liam Cohen out of Tampa Bay, Todd Monken out of Baltimore.
Yeah, I those are both good calls. I still like. I mean, he had one interesting stint with Carolina, but Carolina is such a mess as an organization. But I like Joe Brady too. I think Joe Brady, Buffalo, what he was able to do at LSU with Joe Burrow. I mean, so if you're going to get a young quarterback, and I know, there's the usual list, the Johnsons. I mean, like these are people everybody talks about. Aaron Glenn, clearly he's going to go to the Saints, more a defensive guy, obviously. But I also think that Cliff Kingsbury will be a hot commodity. I know it didn't go well in Arizona for him. I'm not saying he's the right selection for the Raiders if the Raiders go for a new head coach. But he's going to be hot too. But I think to your point, you mentioned 2 names that I think most fans aren't going to be necessarily familiar with. And that's where I would look. I wouldn't look at all these big, sexy names, the competition for those guys. Not saying that the Raiders can't be in on some of those guys too, but I just think that you're going to see the Joe Bradys and some of these other coaches that are going to be more realistic targets if they decide to move on from Antonio Pierce. All right, Armando, thank you for the call. I appreciate it very, very much. Next, we're going to Jay in Pennsylvania. Here's Jay.
Hey guys, it's Jay from PA. We all know about coaching. You know, if AP's gone, Ben Johnson, Bobby Slowick, two great names to put out there. But I want your opinion on this third one. Monken from Baltimore. Now, I may be connecting too many dots and just be overly excited to get an offensive mind in there, but there's such a huge disconnect, I think, in quarterbacks today from college to the NFL. There's so many that are failing now, and I think it's because of the transition. There's a huge break in transition. Todd Monken was the offensive coordinator for Georgia for 3 seasons, if I'm not mistaken. Kirby Smart, head coach, he's not calling the offensive play, so you knew it was Monken. Who did he coach there? Zamir White, Brock Bowers. I mean, you got 2 guys that were cornerstones to that offense. And then he comes to the NFL. And Lamar was great. The Ravens' offense has always been good. But they've been ranking top 6 or 7 in the league last year and this year with him. What do you guys think about maybe going with Monken and bringing in a familiar face for Zamir White, Brock Bowers? Maybe he could help that transition from college to the NFL for a new quarterback. I'm not saying Johnson or Slowick can. I think they would be great. Obviously, Slowick with Stroud, and I'm sure Johnson couldn't make anything work. But I'm curious your guys' opinion on Monken. Hopefully, we could get some calls from Raider fans on Monken. Love hearing their opinion as well. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks for everything. Have a good one.
All right, Mo. Monken, what do you think?
I guess we have the synergy there on Monken because he was my number 2 option after Liam Cohen. I didn't go into detail with the Georgia connection, so that was a good call there. Yeah. But the fact that Monken, as he mentioned, was able to put that Georgia offense on the map because Georgia was most known for its defense. But when Monken was there, their offense was clicking with, and those guys necessarily didn't pan. Some of those guys as quarterbacks didn't necessarily pan out in the NFL. But you look at what that offense is able to do at Georgia with some of the players that he mentioned, what they're able to do under him in Baltimore. I think it would be a good hire. Now, I also understand some people are going to push back on the Monken suggestion to say, well, he didn't pan out as an OC in Tampa Bay or Cleveland when Baker Mayfield was there. But if you look at the progression, sometimes it doesn't work out the first time around. Sometimes it's just not the right fit. We all know how bad the Cleveland situation was. Tampa Bay was a very different situation for Monken. He goes to college. He comes into the NFL, and all of a sudden, the Ravens and the Bulldogs have innovative offenses with multiple playmakers. Those teams have identities or had identities under Monken, but they're able to be flexible based on who their opponent is and attack certain weaknesses. I brought up the Ravens again. If they have to attack you with the tight end, they have 2 tight ends who can do that. If they run downhill, I know Derrick Henry is the face of that offense right now. They can definitely do that. But Lamar Jackson can also throw downfield. I know he took a lot of criticism for, Lamar Jackson can't throw. Have you watched Lamar Jackson play lately? Yeah, have you watched him throw to Rashad Bateman or Zay Flowers or Mark Andrews or Isaiah Likely? Sooner or later, Deontay Johnson, who they acquired from the Carolina Panthers, is going to get involved. They don't really depend, outside of Derrick Henry being the constant there, they don't really depend on one particular pass catcher to beat defenses. They have multiple ways to beat you, and that's a staple of a good offense.
Yeah, Monken will be interesting, too, because I think he will be in demand. I think Chicago's a spot I would watch for him as well because of the young quarterback situation there, but also he's a guy from Chicago originally, the Wheaton area. So I think that there might be some synergy there, too, as well. But all these names, I mean, good names and good call. So I certainly appreciate it, Jay in Pennsylvania, as we roll through the show. All right. I want to read this one comment off of YouTube, and it's from Top Beats with a Z00. and he left this after our last show. So I'm not going to read the whole comment, but I'm going to read the gist of the beginning. And he's talking about our last show. He says, best point of the broadcast, the head coach position in the NFL is not typically an internship position. AP doesn't seem to have any interest in familiarizing himself with the offensive plays because he never has a playboard in his hand, nor does he seem to be in constant contact with the offensive coordinators in the booth. Marvin Lewis doesn't seem to be going out of his way to assist during the game, helping AP make sound game decisions. He certainly doesn't have defensive coordinator experience, nor does he have offensive coordinator experience, in addition to players complaining that practice isn't being coordinated well at all. Ultimately, what has occurred is that AP is not qualified to assume the head coach position. He also goes to talk on about Ben Johnson and Brian Dable and some of these other guys who do offense. He's in favor of Mike Vrabel eventually. But his point about, and Mo, you said this the last couple of shows too, if you're going to be a CEO type head coach, which is what Antonio Pierce is, you kind of have to make sure your staff is in good shape, but you also have to sort of know a little bit about a lot of things, and then you rely on your talent for depth. And this is where I think he struggles, and people don't see that because they're just focused on wins and losses, and they excuse wins and losses because of injuries and other quarterback, that kind of stuff, which is some truth in that. But this piece is something much more different, nuanced, and important when you're talking about a head coach.
It's all about how the team also functions operationally. So I know we pay attention to what happens on game day, the wins and losses, the scores, how many points did they score and give up. But you have to also be able to run a team behind the scenes. The players openly complained about the scheduling, something so basic as the scheduling being inefficient. That's basic 101 stuff. That's stuff that you should have shored up in the off season, or at latest the first week of this or of the regular season when you get into a rhythm. You shouldn't have issues with scheduling in November, October. And the fact that he didn't have, and what peeves me is the fact that he didn't have a young, innovative mind to replace his reported third option at OC worries me as well. If a person was your third option, you know there's a chance it may not work out. So you better have a plan B ready to go, who can possibly be the long-term solution there. And you and I both agree on this, Scott. We don't think Scott Turner is going to be there past his interim role this year. So it's just multiple blunders on multiple levels, which leads me to believe he's not head coaching material. But as our first caller Armando said, I'm willing to see what happens in the second half of the season for him to change my mind on that one.
Right. And that's the thing too. I want to be wrong about it, but I don't think I am at this point. But again, you have an opportunity to show evidence that, okay, first half of the season went terrible. So now do you see improvement? Do you see, and it's interesting with the players. I know a lot of people are being hard on the player. Well, they asked for this coach to be hired. Now they're throwing him under the bus. Well, I don't think they're throwing him under the bus, but I do believe that, yes, you had an overcorrection, right? And this is why Antonio Pierce did well last year. Part of the reason was they felt that Josh McDaniels was too strict, too structured, all that stuff. Okay, great. So you bring Antonio Pierce, they're smoking cigars in the locker room, they're yelling Raiders, they're doing all that kind of stuff. And now the players are complaining because there's no structure, right? Basically. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. Nobody said there's no structure, but I'm paraphrasing and exaggerating a little bit. But so now it's sort of, I see why fans are like, wait a minute, dudes, you were under the thumb of the evil Josh McDaniels. Then you get AP, you do well, and now you're saying he's not doing enough to keep you structured. So that again is an important piece, and why we talked about, Mo, you and I, during the offseason, the transition from an interim coach to being the full-time guy is a much different role with different challenges and different problems. That's why he could do so well last year, and this year he's been struggling. So we'll see the rest of the season. We got time, and we'll figure out. All right. We're going to get to the last call of the day, and that is from our good friend Jacob in Fresno.
Scott, go, friends. Hey, and bitty town, no boating. This is Jacob from Fresno. What's up, guys? So, I'm listening to the show on Tuesday, right? You guys are talking about a Jim Harbaugh, right? And AP, and how we went with AP, right? But then, you say something, Mo, you say, he probably wasn't going to come to Vegas anyway. So that makes me feel better. Anyway, no, what I wanted to talk about, guys, this is hard-hitting stuff. This is stuff that professional writers need to hear about. I don't know if you've ever seen that video of Jim Harbaugh back when he's at Michigan. He's just really going ham, picking his nose and eating it. And I'm like, wow, he's going for it, man. That's pretty impressive stuff. But he's a heck of a coach, goes on to win the national championship. This guy is pretty serious. And so I'm thinking, okay, yeah, I guess guys that pick their nose and eat it, they're pretty extravagant at what they do. Fast forward to this year, a few weeks ago, I don't know if you guys saw this, but Gardner Minshew going ham, just going to town, picking his nose and eating it. I'm not even making this up. If you haven't seen it, I urge you, please go look it up. It is shocking how explicit it was. It was just right in your face. And I am not fooling with you. A few weeks later, Devontae Adams traded to the Jets, and who does it again? Aaron Rodgers. Devontae Adams, quarterbacks just pick their nose. I don't know what it is. But here's what I'm thinking. Extravagant coach Jim Harbaugh picks his nose and eats it. It works out for him. He wins championships. I guess what it is, the common denominator is if you pick your nose and eat it, you're probably a mediocre quarterback because Jim was kind of mediocre, not to down on it, whatever, It's the truth. They were mediocre. Gardner's mediocre. Aaron is now mediocre. Probably didn't pick his nose before. Anyway, guys, I got two questions for you. Next year, we got the draft coming up, and I'm hearing all these stories. Shedeur really wants to be a Raider. Is there any possible way Shedeur forces himself to the Raiders? Is that possible? Because I think it might be. In some sort of, crazy way, that might happen. Dion might really want him to go to Vegas, be tax-free, get on a team where he feels like he has control. Second question, what does AP have to do for the rest of the season in order to prove you guys wrong and get you on his side and say, you know what, he deserves another shot? I appreciate you guys. You take it easy and go Raiders.
All right, Jacob. I think 2.5 minutes of nose picking, followed by 30 seconds of questions about the Raiders' future.
I sincerely hope our audience who's listening weren't eating breakfast while Jacob went on his nose picking scouting rant.
Oh my gosh, that was funny. Oh boy. But to the questions, we'll leave the nose picking to Jacob. But as far as the questions, Shedeur Sanders, can he force his way? There are ways to, like, if the Raiders are in the top two pick, because I think Shedeur Sanders is going to go 1 or 2. I'm thinking maybe 3. Who knows? We'll see what happens the rest of the way. But if he goes 1, 2, and the Raiders are 3 or 2 or 1, yeah, I think you could pull the Eli Manning, what he did with the Chargers, and they swap picks and all that stuff. It seems less possible to do today than it has been in the past. But I think with that personality, with his dad, who's already been very, very vocal about it, I could see them do that. But in order for the Raiders to be in position for him to even do that, it can't be like the Raiders are picking 10th and somebody picks him first and the Raiders have to swing a trade. It's a much more difficult thing to force, I think, Mo, versus if the Raiders are in the top 3 picks of the draft where it's a little more doable.
Well, first we have to figure out if Shedeur Sanders picks his nose, because if he does, then he's going to be a mediocre quarterback according to Jacob. So I think that's the first thing we have to figure out before we even talk about Shedeur playing for the Raiders. But in all seriousness, you're right, Scott. If the Raiders are outside of the top 5, it would be hard for Shedeur to push himself that far, unless he just says, "I'm not playing for any other team but the Raiders," and I don't think we're gonna hear that from him. The other thing that Jacob asked about, what can Antonio Pierce do to change our minds?
Yes,
he's back for year 2. There has to be some improvement operationally and on the field. We talked about the scheduling inefficiencies, the players complaining about it in that open meeting during the bye week. The product on the field is not what it should be, even with the injuries. We talked about the Bucs losing their top 2 wide receivers and still being able to move the football, right? So even with the injuries, you should be able to show that you're competitive and a competent football team. Now, the Raiders try hard, but based on what the players are saying, they're not prepared as best as they could be. So we could start there, Jacob. We can't hear any complaints about scheduling inefficiencies and not being prepared to play football games, because if you're not prepared, that goes on the coaching staff, which goes to the head coach. We could start there, and then hopefully, if that gets better, the product on the field gets better, then we can talk about AP being back in 2025.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And we'd all like to see it. It'd be a lot more fun to talk about progress versus regression. So we'll see how it all works out. But there's a lot of people who think that Antonio Pierce deserves another chance already because of injury and all this stuff. I just don't agree with that point of view. I'm not saying that it's not a valid point of view. I just don't agree with it. But I do think Mo's comments here about what he would need to do over the last 8 games, I'm definitely in agreement with that. So we'll see. All right. Well, that's going to close it out for this edition of Silver and Black today. We appreciate the audience in Las Vegas listening to us on the radio. We also appreciate all of you who subscribe to the podcast. Thank you so much for continuing to do that. Make sure you subscribe if you don't already, and rate and review. And also a big thank you to our video sponsor. Yes, they bring you the video, and that is the good friends at BetUS, and where you can get 150% sign-up bonus. That's right, 150% on your first deposit up to $2,000. Just use the code YouTube150. That is YouTube150 to get that special, very special sign-up bonus. Start playing today. Again, promo code YouTube150 at BetUS. All right, Mo, we're closed out, man. What do you got going the rest of the week?
Well, gonna go back into the laboratory, cook up some plays for my Dub Club crew from BetUS, by the way. They have a lot of good lines over there. I use a lot of alternate lines and betting lines over from our buddies over at BetUS because they have better lines than some of the other sports books. So be on the lookout for that if you're in the Dub Club. If you're on Twitter, because I post them for free. But until then, see you on Sunday after the game. Hopefully we see a more entertaining Raiders offense.
That's right. All right, Mo, take care, my man. I will see you on Tuesday.
Take care, Scott. Take care, Raider Nation.
All right. For our producer, Mike Rabier, for our executive radio producer in Las Vegas, that is Mark Bonilla. And for Momo, and I'm Scott Branson. This has been Silver and Black today. We will see you guys after the game live with a post game with myself and Murph from Raiders Fan Radio. And then we will also be back with a full show on Tuesday. Have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.